Yali Reinoso arrived in Denver less than 3 months ago in December. In her home country of Venezuela, Yali was a criminal defense attorney. She also worked to bring humanitarian aid to people who were starving, and for that was targeted as a threat by President Nicolas Maduro. She went to Colombia for 4 years until, she says, she was threatened that her name would be reported to Venezuelan authorities as a political oppositionist. So Yali, her husband, and their daughter began the journey to the United States border. Hola Yali, gracias para hablar conmigo de nuevo. Please tell us about your trek from Venezuela to the US border. How did you get here?
The trek here was very traumatic. We had to cross the Darién jungle, which is very dangerous, and there are many, many obstacles. There are plenty of rivers that are quite high, and we were witnesses to lots of dead people as well along the way. And considering that my husband has a disability on his leg, and that my daughter has a disability, a cognitive disability, the trek was quite hazardous and difficult, and it was not easy to get here.
And at one point, Yali, your daughter and your husband almost drowned, right?
Yes, that's right. We had to cross the river holding hands because the current was very, very strong. But because the river was so strong and the river was so high, our daughter got loose and she stopped holding hands with us. And it was thanks to other people that were around that we were able to save her.
And how many months did it take, Yali? How long were you walking?
Almost 2 months for us to be able to get to the US, and it wasn't easy. We also had to use the train. We had to use to get on the famous train nicknamed La Bestia because it is known widely that Mexican drug cartels were kidnapping people that were taking the bus. So we decided to take the train. However, it wasn't easy to get on the train. We had to stay for about 15 days at a place called La Cementera because the train wouldn't make a stop. And so a lot of us gathered there and we went onto the tracks so that the train would stop. And once it did, we were able to get on it. It was not an easy ride. It was very, very cold. I saw a lady died. She froze to death on top of the train, and so she wasn't able to hold on to her daughter, who was then dropped off from the train or dropped down from the train, and who passed away as well. And while we were on the train, we unfortunately we lost the food that we had for my daughter. We dropped it, and at some point I had to get off of the train to fetch food, to find food. And the train started moving again, and it was leaving me, so I had to run a lot. I had to run and to run and to run until I was able to catch up with it. But I almost lost my life as well while trying to do this. And the train was not easy because my daughter was also scared of it, and it wasn't an easy. It was also a very traumatic part of the way up here.
I cannot imagine. Tell us, Yali, what happened when you got to the border in Texas, and did you apply for asylum there? And also, why Denver? Why did you come specifically to Denver?
So we came in through Ciudad Juárez. We had to cross the Rio Grande or the Rio Bravo, and it was very difficult as well. It was really, really cold, and we got there at around 7 p.m. And it was only because we were able to set a fire that we were able to stay alive during that night. And then Border Patrol didn't let us go through at that point, so that's why we spent the night as well. And at around 5 a.m. the next day, we turned ourselves in, and they kept us for a few days, and then they released us on December 24th, but only for a couple of days. Then they captured us again, and they were wanting to know where we were going and why Denver. Because we had a friend in Denver who said that he could help us out to start our lives in the US once we got here. But then at some point, he turned his phone off, and we were no longer able to reach him. And that's why when the border patrol, caught us again, then we had to ask for refuge, and we had to ask them for assistance, and we asked them that it would be in Denver, and thanks to people in Denver, we were able to find help in a refuge, and that's why we're still here.
Acá a Denver, pues nos consiguieron un refugio y actualmente todavía estoy en el refugio.
Yali, in Venezuela, you were a criminal defense attorney. And of course, you're not able to practice law in the United States, but you've found a way to help people. You're volunteering through All Souls in Denver to help other new people to the country apply for asylum and try to get work permits. Can you talk a bit about that volunteer work that you're doing and what you're learning from other newcomers to Denver?
Yes, I used to work as an attorney in Venezuela, but I can no longer do that here in the US, and that's something that I try to make very clear, that I try to share at the very beginning with my immigrant brothers and sisters, as I call them, when we meet each other. What I do to help them instead is try to get all their documents and paperwork in order to request the asylum petition or request in order to do it, which is the number 589, and I also asked them whether they got here before or after July 31st. So that's what I do basically, is to get their papers and documents in order so that we can make the request. And I try to tell them that even if they have a certain amount of papers and documents, it doesn't mean that they fulfill all their requirements. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that that their request is gonna be successful, and that they might face deportation if that is the case. And so I try to be as clear as possible with that, and I try to help them out with that request.
Thank you. And the significance of the July date, of course, is if you arrived after that date in July to the United States, under federal law, you're not eligible for the work permit. So Yali, that would include you and your husband, right? You're not able right now to apply for work authorization because you weren't here before July. And I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little bit about, first of all, where you're living. I believe still in a city-funded hotel room. And what are your longer-term plans in terms of being able to make a living here in Colorado?
We have requested asylum because I am a political refugee, and that's one of the requirements in applying and being able to apply for asylum. And so we already presented our request, and we are waiting the 150 days that we have to stay here to then be able to apply for a job permit. And yes, we are still in this hotel room, but however, we have already started seeking housing elsewhere, and we've been getting help from other organizations, just like Papagayo and Vive, to find housing elsewhere.
Last question, please, Yali. I was just hoping that you could talk about, what's been your biggest obstacle after you've arrived in Denver? And, is it what you expected? Are you glad you're here? Are you hopeful? Or, how do you feel about what's ahead now that you're trying to settle in Denver?
Yes, it has been worth it. It has been worth it just because, like, the mere fact of not being persecuted and of not having a constant fear of and threat. So it's been worth it to be here. And I'd say that the greatest obstacle that we face has been finding work, getting a job, because this having a sustainable job would make it easier to be able to finance our lives over here and to be able to pay for what we need to pay. However, as migrants, this is not just an obstacle for me and my family, but as migrants, it's very complicated to find a job because we don't necessarily have the documents needed. And thank God we are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we're hopeful that we'll get work permits and we'll be able to find a job to afford a living here in the US. And this would not be possible without a job, of course. And well, yes, we've been here since December, and we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Pues apenas lo que llevamos son desde diciembre para acá, únicamente como de vamos a cumplir 4 meses acá y hemos cumplido algunos objetivos que yo creo que en otro país no los fuéramos cumplir.
Thank you, Yali. Muchas gracias, Yali.
I thank you all, and apologies for my tears, but this has not been an easy process, and this is a shared experience for immigrants trying to get here. It's not just my family that suffered through getting through all the territories, through the jungle, through Mexico. It's not, some people do worse, some people do a bit better, some people lose family on their way here, some people get kidnapped, some people get raped, and so it's definitely not an easy thing to get over here. And I just wanted to share that